Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Keisha. So that was fun. It's exciting to discuss these ideas. Now we do have about, I don't know, I guess about 10 or so, 12 people on who might have some questions and dialogue. Let me apologize for anybody who wanted to watch it via video. We certainly had some technical issues, and I think it's time to get back to some in-person meetings when we can here sometime soon. But if people are on the phone, the best way to do this is to hit *9 if you want to ask a question or make a comment and get response from some of the speakers. Keisha might have some limited time, so maybe people have some questions for her. But so if people want to hit *9, okay, it looks like someone's got a question here. See if I can unmute you effectively. For some reason. Oops.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Faz from Michigan. This was an incredible discussion. Thank you, and thanks to all the speakers for giving their presentations. It was pretty amazing. I had a question about if anyone had some technical details on this. This is going, beyond the moon and what we're talking about doing, after we establish a base on the moon, and then even after that, is does anyone have any ideas about recreating a magnetosphere? We have a magnetosphere here on the Earth, which keeps our atmosphere intact, and there's evidence that Mars used to have one many millions or perhaps billions of years ago, whereby it kept water in the atmosphere in Mars. There's been some talk about creating an artificial magnetosphere, having it powered by nuclear fusion or nuclear fission in orbit, perhaps in a, what are these called, Lagrange points, where there's a stable place where an object, a satellite, could stay. Has anyone heard about this? Any thoughts about this?
Great, thanks, Faz. That's a great question. Let me address it, and then I'll throw it to Keisha and Ben and Brian, because I think you've brought up a number of aspects. The one thing I would raise just briefly is the question of what role does life play in shaping questions of the magnetic sphere on Earth. What role might that play on Mars? And these are questions that really require the ability to begin to experiment and demonstrate some of these questions. Life has a very powerful effect deep into the Earth's crust. And it's not a question, it's not clear. I mean, clearly the problem with science today is that it's reductionary. It reduces things down to pure physics without recognizing these various domains of other principles, such as life. So that would be one question I think we have to be willing to consider and entertain, just as a fun kind of response. But maybe Keisha, do you have anything in response to Faz?
Well, one of the things I just wrote about recently is the fact that going back to the Apollo era, we were looking into this and one of the science that still exists on the moon from the Apollo era are radio telescopes that they have there, or rather that you have the question of what we've left behind from the standpoint of that you have the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and it is beaming back information from the moon. The question is, we found out that the moon has a core, and so the question is, did the moon at one point in time have its own magnetosphere? How did this work in particular? And what more can we learn about it from the standpoint of the new developments and technologies that we have on the moon, as far as the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter going around?
Ben or Brian?
I think it's a fascinating question. I haven't looked into the subject directly, but I mean, my first thought is this is what we should be challenging young people with. We have all these really effectively brilliant thinkers, brilliant minds, people going through the educational system, as problematic as it is. And, there's obviously room for improvement. You have people that, have capabilities, and what are they being asked to study? Climate change garbage, how to make hypersonic missiles that can compete in some arms race, get sucked into the defense sector. I think this just illustrates the kind of questions that, would really culturally drive a sense of optimism. This is what mankind could be doing. We should be looking at ways to tackle this. We should be looking at ways of addressing these kinds of questions. I'm sure we're not going to know, can we do it? If we can do it, how do we do it? If we can't do it, how do we know we can't do it? Until you actually seriously try and tackle some of these things. So yeah, and what's the role of the magnetosphere in life, in the biosphere? Will it be necessary to maybe at least mimic some elements of that, if not on a global scale of Mars as a planetary body as a whole, maybe on a smaller scale, for locally for certain periods of time? We're going to come up with all kinds of new insights into life and biology by studying, how these living systems behave, don't behave in other environments outside the planet Earth.
Okay, that's great. So why don't we see if anybody, there's another question here. Let's see what, you're unmuted, I think. Go ahead.
This is Hunter. I have a question. One thing, Mike, that you said, you just mentioned that the Fed has $4 trillion that hasn't been spent, and Brian referenced all these really tremendous things that could be done for really with a fraction of that amount of money in terms of building the space CCC and all kinds of infrastructure and so forth. And I know that China has recently, they've built up their high-speed rail, for example. They have like 20,000 miles of high-speed rail, and they plan to build to double that in the next 15 years. I know that we could be doing the same kind of thing, but my question is, how do we get this across to Americans that this is possible? That we've had our country in reverse gear, and how do we just kind of open people's eyes to the idea that we can just unleash and start moving in a different direction and start doing all these things? So that's my question.
Great. Brian, you want to take a whack at that one?
Okay. Well, the short answer is fire their imaginations. There's such a damper. The mass media, of course, most people don't. I think a majority of Americans, if you poll them, don't even know about Project Artemis, or know very little. But on the other hand, we have all the alternate media, so-called. Roger Stone was making this point a couple weeks ago on the show on LaRouche Pack, along with Bill Binney, that there's lots of levers. So exactly this kind of broadcast, this kind of show, this kind of discussion, more importantly, is part of how you fire the imaginations. And we have to get more individuals out on point, challenging people to challenge their neighbors, their friends, their coworkers, to lift their eyes to the stars. I mean, literally, but figuratively as well. I don't think there's some automatic solution, but I mean, it is true, as Lyndon used to say, there's a point at which, the water starts coming out of the light bulbs. It's anomalous behavior, and people have to think differently, or they're open to thinking differently. And I think this is the circumstance we're in now. And I think what Trump has done, as has been said here, in promoting and sticking by Project Artemis, is absolutely critical to our efforts. But the other side of it is as quickly as possible. If President Trump goes with an infrastructure program, even begins to outline such a program, if we can begin to move dirt, I mentioned the Army Corps projects ready to go. People can become excited very quickly, as they did in the 30s with the Civilian Conservation Corps, that suddenly, you know, people that were young men had been kicked to the curb were suddenly productive and, you know, developing as human beings, blossoming. It was the most popular program in the 1930s and early 40s was the CCC program. So if we can get our young men and women, you know, into this kind of modern day equivalent effort, even begin to say $50 billion as an initial program to launch the space CCC. I mean, it could be less, it could be more, but the point is, you know, actually prioritize it in the context of infrastructure and the Artemis program. The ripple effects, the shock effects would be tremendous. So that's a partial answer, I'm sure.
That's great. Keisha, you want to jump in there?
I wanted to go back to the first question because I thought it, one thing that just came up in some of the recent findings and also what we already know about the moon, and I think this is important because it goes back to Kraft Erica, and the idea that the scientists have known that the moon has had a magnetic field for billions of years. And at some point in time, that magnetic field died out. So now with some of the recent research in terms of infrared laser beaming back to Earth, we're starting to figure out one interesting thing is that we're starting to see phenomena where the moon is actually moving at galactic levels, or should we say it's very, you know, small levels. I think it's something like 1.5 centimeters a year away from the Earth. You know, what's causing that? They're showing now that the moon has been found to have a fluid core, but they're trying to look more into what was inside of this fluid core that could actually give us an insight into when it was that the moon lost its magnetic field and how we might be able to develop this and how we might be able to create this again. But also, you know, you have a situation where if you think about it from the standpoint of Kraft Erica, he made the point about when we go to the moon and we start developing the moon, it's going to be like when the generations of people started to build the great cathedrals. You're not just going to go there and have, you know, you're not just going to go there and say, let's, you know, launch some equipment up there, you know, let's build some structures, and then all of a sudden we have permanent colonies on the moon. Like you're going to create your own biosphere, you know, because you're not taking the biosphere of the Earth with you. So it's very interesting, and from that standpoint, is that you're going to have to, you know, basically develop the moon from its. You won't have the embryo of the Earth to take with you. You won't. You know, you're going to be going and developing the entirety of the moon, creating a new biosphere. As I say, you won't have the terrestrial womb of the environment. But so I think that this is very interesting when you think about there's always an increase of galactic changes in the way that Ben was saying it in his presentation. You know, you have to look at what's actually happening with these processes and how mankind would be intervening into these processes. So I think that's it's, as said, it's very fascinating, some of these questions that we're having to answer right now, and the continuing changes and evolutionary process of how our solar system works and functions.
That's great. So if people want to ask a question, it's a *9 on your phone. We can take maybe one more, and we'll get into maybe some closing remarks. Let me just say one thing. In thinking about the idea for this, and I think this was a good, I think, first shot at this broader question of what does it mean to establish a first colony outside of Earth, this extraterrestrial imperative that Croft Erica referenced. One aspect of that struck me was, when did mankind first become a planetary species? Meaning, when did we as a species begin to operate within the entire surface of the Earth? Not in limited geographical areas, not limited by the basic kind of continental questions, but became transoceanic as a species. And the one aspect of that, which is probably was built 6,000 years ago, which are the Great Pyramids of Egypt. And yet that certainly indicates a civilization far more advanced for a far longer period of time than simply a civilization that just had made major advancements and then decided to build these massive pyramids with astronomical and relationship, both for observations and other questions. And so you say maybe mankind has operated throughout as a transoceanic species, navigating by the stars, astronavigation, for approximately 10,000 years. And there's a characteristic to that, because what we're embarking upon today, what China has launched with the Belt and Road, echoing the LaRouche plan for a world land bridge by Helge Lin, that we start to actually develop our entire planet as if it was our first of many planetary colonies to come. And I think both of these questions coincide. They're compositionally required. That you both have to maximize and fulfill the potential of our own planet, which has provided the resources far beyond anything else we've found so far available to us outside our solar system or even within it. But at the same time, you have to compel that, to move that process of global development. You have to then also have major scientific advancement. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as my closing comments. And I don't think we have any other questions. So maybe we'll go backwards from Ben to Brian to Keisha and see if we have any closing remarks on the day and your thoughts and the moment that we're at. And we'll pick this up again sometime later on.
I think this was a lot of fun. I think we got to keep this level of discussion going, and I enjoyed the chance to participate. I'm sure we'll be continuing this because this is, this is critical for the world situation. I think, it was, I believe, 2009. So, not too much in the aftermath of the 2007-2008 blowout that Mr. LaRouche really started re-emphasizing the Moon-Mars colonization program. He, in the context of a new global economic order, a new Bretton Woods agreement around creating a new economic order of sovereign nations, led by a coalition of the 4 leading nations with the power to create this. He was calling for the US, China, Russia, and India to come together to create this new global order, bring power back to sovereign nations collaborating with a vision for what they can do with the planet together to progress, to move things forward, take power away from this international financial elite centered in London, stooges in Wall Street, various other places. In that context, he, at a certain point in 2009, in a series of international webcasts, he put the Moon-Mars program, in a certain sense, up front and center as part of that whole program. I believe his word was you need the spice to make the whole program work at a certain point. You need something to drive the whole thing into the future, look 2 generations into the future at least, and say, what are we creating? Where are we going, right? And that's space, that's the moon, that's Mars, that's mankind in the solar system, right? So this is not, I hope this has come across, this is not some fun thing that certain nerds might want to see happen. This is about mankind, this is about humanity, this is not disconnected from the campaign for a new economic order. This is critical for it, because this is the spirit, the soul of mankind.
That's great. Now, I think we have a participant who's been on the whole time via video from Nevada, from Reno. I'm just going to unmute them to see if they have a question. If they stuck it out this long, I'm going to got to give them a chance. And then Brian and Keisha, you guys can respond and incorporate your closing remarks in that. So Maddie, I'm trying to unmute you. Yeah, Maddie, I think you're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, I was trying to get a hold of you guys a little earlier. This is Joe Rye here in Nevada, Reno. A little bit late to ask a bunch of questions, but I had a bunch. Should I go ahead? Okay, I will.
Yeah, maybe just one or two, not a bunch, but go ahead.
Okay. The whole cosmic history of the moon, that's really interesting. Is that done through, in other words, is there a continual record there of cosmic changes in the materials there? And how does that work? And then on the question of the very low frequencies that we can get from the far side of the moon, how did we actually originally discover the heliosphere? And will those new telescopes observing those very low frequencies be able to help us understand the heliosphere also more accurately in terms of the sun's magnetosphere and whatnot? And then I guess I'll skip my longer question. I'll just go to the fun question here. So a lot of the current space fiction, it's oriented around, warp speeds, wormholes, cryo sleep, and I just find it very unrealistic. I've always thought that if you're going to travel to another habitable solar system, it's going to take a long time, 60 years, 120 years, maybe longer. So I'm curious about any thoughts on what this would mean for these spacefaring families and societies, and how that could be accomplished. Any thoughts on that long-term space travel? So I'll just leave it at that.
That's great. So why don't we just go back to Ben, since some of the questions Joe Ray asked were to some of Ben raised in the initial presentation, and then we'll go to Brian and Keisha to respond and close up.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll just hit the first two briefly, and obviously these can be subject to much more discussion. But with the moon, relatively recently, it was discovered that the moon has been volcanically active recently in geological terms in the last tens of millions of years, whereas the assumption was it had been geologically, geophysically dead for billions of years. So the fact that we have evidence that there was volcanism on the moon, flows of molten lava on the lunar surface as recent as 10, 15, 20 million years ago is fascinating. And one area that's been posed to look for records of galactic cosmic ray flux is in these volcanic flows on the lunar surface. When the flow is fresh, some form of record of the cosmic ray flux is believed to be recorded in the molten state and then kind of preserved as it solidifies. So that's one area of study that I know people have studied, written about, and propose that this would be a way we can get a record of the travels of the solar system through the galaxy, the galactic cosmic ray flux from lunar surface records. There very well might be more ways to do it that I'm not aware of, and there probably will be ways we'll figure out the more we get into this kind of work, and the more bright young people we get spending their time and effort thinking about how to figure this stuff out. And then I don't know exactly when the heliosphere was first discovered, but yeah, I believe that very low frequency radio observations will give us some better understanding of its structure, how it functions. Some of these lower density, relatively lower temperature, lower density plasmas are the structures that radiate in these lower frequency radio ranges. So more detailed analysis of larger structures of the sun's plasma magnetic field the heliosphere, I'm sure will be part of what they'll be able to study with these kinds of very low frequency radio observations. Exactly how far that'll go, I'm not totally sure. It's an open question, but I think Brian and Keisha could jump in on your last question there.
Well, just on a personal note, growing up, the idea of the universe, common view was basically there's Earth and then there's all these other rocks and gas, in some cases gaseous states, planets, and otherwise rocks, and that's all there is. It's been extraordinary what's been discovered, you know, regarding water on the moon and Mars and on and on. I mean, you know, we're just beginning, and it recalls for me you know, the LaRouche's viewpoint, Vernadsky's viewpoint, that, you know, the biosphere is really present everywhere in the universe as a potentiality, and the noosphere, what Vernadsky developed as the noosphere, as well as a potentiality. And so when we think in terms of going out there, we're going out to a universe that is a living process in which the potentialities to transform it for mankind, we should be confident will emerge. Not naive, but confident will emerge, utilizing the faculties, as Kepler said, that very much mirror the thinking, the thought processes of God himself. So I think, you know, I just think it's fruitful to clear out this idea of a dead universe, and think. I very much agree with what Ben is saying, and he's taken it much further in terms of, you know, these questions that you know we're being challenged by. So I would add that, and then going back to the question that Hunter raised, it's been pointed out that, you know, in the bailout of 2008, 2009, the government spent more money in that bailout effort than NASA has spent in its entire existence. So the capability to mobilize resources and actually put them to use in a transformative way is right at our fingertips. You know, it's really it's a matter of breaking the boundaries, you know, in our own minds. And finally, I would just say, sure, we're going to go out to those Lagrange points. Those are going to be key as we go out and explore the universe robotically and by mankind. We're going to be putting space stations out there and so forth, and utilizing them, whether it's for, you know, a mirror the size of the aperture of Mars orbit, or others, other purposes. The utilization of the magnetosphere, or the development of artificial magnetic environments. I mean, that's also been proposed on a much smaller scale, just on the moon for human habitats or spaceships, as you're probably aware. So the capabilities to utilize these features, principles operant in the universe and put them to man's use is certainly there, and we're going to need them. But I think as well, we should be very clear that the universe will respond.
Well, I want to end with a organizing challenge to everyone, because I think that what we just presented here, as if you go back to beginning and the intention, as we stated, this isn't just about, the fun ideas of space exploration, but what we need people to do right now is look at the fact that we have a unique moment of opportunity before us to advance mankind in a way that has never been done before. And when we're talking about the development of permanent colonies, industrialization of the moon, you're not going to do that in a system that believes that there are limitations to growth, monetarily or otherwise. And this is what Lyndon LaRouche and Kraft Erica fought against. They waged a political battle to ensure that we defeat this environmentalist, Malthusian, anti-human agenda. That's what Obama represented. That's what the Greenies, the AOCs, the fact that if you get a Biden and Kamala, whatever, in the White House, you can hang up a Artemis mission. So we got to look at this from the standpoint, this is not just about nice ideas. This is the question of what is going to be the future of mankind. Will we actually open up the age of reason? Will we expand mankind out into the solar system to fully fulfill our commitment to the extraterrestrial imperative of mankind? That's why what I would like you to do, you go to the LaRouche PAC website, you will see that there has just been a policy statement for the LaRouche PAC battle plan, and this battle plan for 2020. This isn't just about the election. This is about how we're going to ensure that this vision for our nation and for the progress of cooperation in space for humanity as a whole is actually fulfilled. And so what I'd like you to do as a part of that 2020 battle plan, I think we should also put in that context, maybe people forgot about this, but at the very beginning of when President Trump announced this Artemis mission, we responded to that with a pamphlet called the Moon Mars, a commitment to Moon Mars colonization. And I think I just want to make sure I have the exact title for you. Yeah, it's We Commit to the Moon Mars Mission. You can find that on the LaRouche PAC website. After listening to this, I want you to go back and actually read that and get it out to people. I mean, we were meeting people in the streets with the campaign posters of, defend President Trump's Artemis mission, Moon Mars mission. And that was the thing more than anything else that was inspiring people. We went to the campuses. We were telling people, this is what you have to be involved in, especially young people, not getting trapped into the small level politics, the council culture, whatever you want to call this craziness that's going on right now. What we need to people, or getting involved in black and white, or so-called racial issues. But the thing that elevates us as a species, human beings, that we all are creative, have the divine spark of reason, is, as Lyndon LaRouche understood, is mankind has to look to the stars. And we have to give that opportunity to every single human being, every single child, and beyond. So that's what I want to end with, and to make sure that people do everything they can to organize for this unique perspective, and to make sure that we can ensure that the Artemis program is successful, not just in 2024, but the fact that we have to use this as a stepping stone for the next billions of years, really, into the industrialization of the moon and Mars and the solar system and beyond. So have some fun.
All right, well said, well said. All right, I think that wraps it up then for today. I appreciate everyone that got on the phones or Zoom to participate. We will have a link at some point posted of YouTube to get this out. So please share that with your friends. Do what Keisha said. Get that material that's been developed over the last number of many years. What Ben went through on the galactic cycles, there's a number of videos and presentations. Let's continue to get this into the discussion and get people thinking about the next 10,000 years of mankind in the galaxy to come. So again, thanks to the speakers, Ben, Brian, and Keisha, and look forward to more to come from LaRouche PAC. Have a good day.